Right. Are we live? Might be, I don't know. I should probably check. Good evening, everyone. We are going to be doing a little PMQ response. I don't know how long this is going to take, because this is a bit different. In the sense that it's not Brexit. It's strange. Good evening to Serene, Have We Left Yet, and Echo. If we are live. Haven't done that in a while. Fantastic, we are live. Brilliant. Hello. Oh god. Ape Man. Let's go with that. So yeah, it's not PMQ. The running theme appears to be the burning injustice, which has become a bit of a catchphrase. Hello, horny hippos. I find it quite fascinating as a catchphrase. This one keeps cropping. Malt loaf. Good name. I used to call my mum's favourite singer that. Meatloaf, that is. Hello, Puck Baker. And yes, I do look fabulous, because, as we all know, I'm a well-established trap. I'll get to that in a second, actually. The burning injustice as a catchphrase has actually started bugging me, in the sense that it doesn't want to die. And as far as I'm concerned, hello, Otaka Judas. It's also one of those really irritating catchphrases, hello, way to twilight. Apparently I'm a moist trap, yes. And I think it's one of those really annoying ones because it sounds so good. The burning injustice. I don't agree with it. I think in the context of it as well, I took the liberty of writing down all the supposed burning injustices. I was supposed to take notes for this as well, but I forgot to. It turns out the page in my notebook that I had earmarked for this only has the burning injustices and the supposed burning injustices, which I will get to. I'll get to when I'm able to. I guess two quick things. Firstly, I have spoken to Penny, who did this avatar as a joke, and I decided to keep using it because hello MC and Davey. I decided to keep using it because Trups's avatar I use on this stream is also made by the same person. Hello Karma. So I decided, fuck it, I don't really care, it's funny. She is going to put a clothed version of this somewhere. Not maybe with just the crown and a proper set of clothes, because I like the crown and the mug. So that'll hopefully be done soon. Still contemplating the name. For ages, the name's bugged me. We'll get to that later. Anyway, the subject's not Brexit. It's the burning injustices. And there are a number of mistakes that are made. And I think it's worth addressing a few of them. And yes, there are a bunch of by-elections happening. I was thinking also of adding some cardboard cutouts, because this is quite an empty set. Perhaps get some cardboard cutouts made, or some pictures and other bits and bobs, to make the scenery look a bit more, I don't know, interesting. We'll see. I'll think of something. Anyway. Oh, not that one. This one. Aha. Put that there. But not a burqa. Well, I can't wear a crown and a burqa, can I? Anyway.
Order. Questions to the Prime Minister, John Lamont.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Question number 1.
The Prime Minister.
Oh, I should point out, before all the virtue, the Speaker announced that they were joined by a bunch of students from a school and wishing some twins a happy birthday for Sunday.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure members across the whole House are always pleased when young people take an interest in and attend the proceedings of this chamber, such as those from Fitzwarren School today. I'm sure members from across the House will want to join me in sending my very best wishes to my honourable friend, the Minister for the Constitution, and her husband, Sandy, on the birth of their daughter, Rosamond. Mr. Speaker, may I also congratulate everyone who took part in the London Marathon on Sunday, including members of this House, parliamentary staff and lobby journalists. And I would particularly like to congratulate my parliamentary private secretary, the honourable member for West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine, who completed the marathon with the fastest time of any member of Parliament this year. Mr. Speaker, just for those who are suggesting otherwise, no, I wasn't chasing him at the time. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Hello, Prospero. There was something she mentioned. I don't remember.
John Lamon!
I associate myself with the comments of the Prime Minister, and I promise to train much harder for next year. On this day in 1707, Scotland and England came together to form the United Kingdom. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that this union has served our country? This union has served our country well, and most people in Scotland agree with that. And does she further agree with me that rather than obsessing with independence, Nicola Sturgeon should get on with the day job and end her neglect of Scotland's NHS, schools and the economy?
Scotland has a mountain of problems, not least because their way of dealing with any of their issues was to raise taxes. When the paper fiddler stands up and asks his questions, he's going to say a few things that are remarkably dense. That I just remembered. They're very dense, and the sense of humour thing is quite refreshing for a moment, because it's going to come crashing down soon enough. I do think with Scotland, like, their way of solving it was just to raise taxes. They're a devolved administration that have a budget, and they blew money on silly pet projects that they shouldn't have used the money on. I think they should chase independence. In fact, let's give it to them. Let's see how well it works out, and this will be more clear to all of you when we get to Ian Blackford's questions, because one of them is quite precious about education, and there's no way the Scottish government could do it. And and we can certainly talk then about the quality of education they receive as well, because that's going to crop up as well. Not going to spoil it. So much for Scots' frugality. Yes, their frugal nature is yeah.
Prime Minister!
First of all, can I congratulate my honourable friend for running the London Marathon, and also for all the money that he raised for Marie Curie on his run. And can I thank him for highlighting this anniversary? I'm sure all members across this House will want to join me in marking this anniversary, because it is. And he is absolutely right that under the SNP and government in Scotland, what we're seeing is public services getting worse, because the SNP are focusing on holding another independence referendum. As my honourable friend said,
it's that whole preparing for something that you haven't guaranteed yet. You know, like no deal. So you put some money aside for it. Money that could be used for something like, I don't know, the NHS perhaps. I like that you get money from the UK government, and you're spending some of it on trying to leave the UK. That's interesting. I had this thought when I was watching this back, just before I started in fact. Maybe I should change the name of PMQ streams to the post hoc ergo propter hoc streams, because this crops up, and I've watched a few back and realised it crops up in every stream. It's quite sad. Hello, Michael Morris.
Says it's time the SNP stopped ignoring those millions of Scots who do not want another independence referendum and got on with the day job and focused on the issues that matter to people like schools and the economy.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join the Prime Minister in congratulating all those who ran the London Marathon, and I think the Shadow Health Secretary getting a personal best shows just how fit the Labour Health team is. Mr. Speaker, can I take this opportunity to wish the House and people across the country a very happy May Day on International Workers' Day. Tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, many people across England will go to the polls to vote in local elections. For many people, the government has delivered nothing but failure. On her first day in office, the Prime Minister promised to fight against the burning social injustices that plague our society.
Okay then. Let's talk about those. The perceived... Some of these are real injustices, but it depends on how you look at them. Like, they're genuine issues, but because of how they're treated... Hello, Honey Monster and Stuart Meatball. Because of how they're treated, I think that the way they approach it denigrates what they are. So, the first would be the wage gap. There are court cases still ongoing with companies about whether or not someone working in a warehouse being paid more than someone working on a shop floor when they do the same job. They don't. Homelessness. Now that is a burning issue. However, their approach to it doesn't centre around the entirety and focuses solely on women. Poverty, again, predominantly focusing in the direction of women, and by extension, food bank usage, which crops up in PMQs. Diversity in all walks of life, especially jobs. We must have full equal representation in every possible facet. So the fact that white people outnumber most people in this country is irrelevant. I put here crime, especially violent crime, but there are other types of crime as well, but that comes up in the next one. Women's stuff. That's what I called it, like domestic violence, rape, and female genital mutilation, because let's not forget here, men can't be victims of DV, rape, and, well, in their case, MGM. It's not really... none of it. It's all fake, okay? It's all fake. It's not a crime, no. Hang on. Because there's going to be one retard who will downvote the stream because I did this. Just for you. I'll say it again. Men can't be victims of rape, domestic violence, or male genital mutilation. Okay. You're welcome. Next, what's this one? Oh, yes. Racism. Next. Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, or properly named faith-based attacks unless you're Christian, in which case we must also think of the Muslims. And for those who don't get that joke, watch my last stream on this channel, because the last stream, we talked about this. The last PMQs, in fact, and it cropped up. And as a cheeky little insert, burning injustice, we'll put a real one in here, because this one's... Hang on, I need to put my sarcasm sign back up, because you've got to be ready for this. Men's rights. Much sarcasm. Anyway. Oh, and earphone warning for those wearing them. For the Whammons, not the Hughes. That needs to be a Labour slogan. That's the best slogan.
Yesterday, an independent government body confirmed that inequality is entrenched in our society from birth to work.
Right, let's have a look at that. I actually have the source for it, don't I? Where is it? Where is it? Oh, I didn't bloody well cop it. Give me a second. I will go and get it, because I know where it is. I know I have the source. Scroll. I do apologise, people, but this is... yes, I know, Serene, that she did lose a seat, because I I've saved that source for my political stream on Friday. Entrenched from birth. Come on, scroll. Helburn, the Trussell Trust. Where is it? I know I have it. Schools, knife crime. There's the report that says class privilege remains entrenched because of social mobility stagnating, and this is from a government report that was commissioned in 2018, where the report highlighted inequality in Britain and set out the key findings and recommendations. Where was it? Okay, so to help address the inequality, the Commission called for the government to extend eligibility and uptake of the 30-hour childcare offer for those working 8 hours a week as a first step, raise per pupil funding by a significant amount from those aged 16 to 19, and become an accredited voluntary living wage employer, so government departments pay the voluntary living wage to civil servants. There was more, wasn't there? Oh yeah, the other key findings. Social mobility stagnated since 2014. 32% of those from working class backgrounds got professional jobs, which has risen by 2% in the last year. From those working class backgrounds, 24% earn less a year than those from professional backgrounds. By age 6, is a 14% gap in phonics attainment. By age 7, the gap is widened to 18% in reading. That says a lot about... and yes, I know about that perfectly faded delusions. My town especially suffers because I live by the ocean, and they brought up... These people come from, like, major cities, buy a holiday home, and push up the cost of living where I live. Even though I live in a really crap house, the cost of living here is getting expensive. Student funding for 16 to 19-year-olds fallen by 12%, and the recommendations included, obviously, the three I mentioned. A student premium for disadvantaged students. Universities and college admissions, or UCAS, work with the Office for Students to develop a system which displays financial support. And actually I support that, because I didn't find out until my third year I was eligible for a £600 grant every year, which they very kindly backdated for 3 years for me. That was the best weekend of my life. So I think it's, it's interesting, but I don't think it's from birth. I think there are obvious differences and advantages you get from having certain backgrounds, but I don't like the way it's not what they said, but how they said it. Let's go with that. In the sense that it's not a burning injustice. It's more of a disadvantage that the children can't control. Let's go with that. The parents' job is to do the best they can for their kids, and I'm not saying none of them are. I think that's what he's trying to do. But by implying that they are doing the best they can, but it's not enough, so it's the government's fault, which I think is wrong. Perhaps I've gotten that wrong. Who knows? Let's carry on.
Can the Prime Minister now admit that her government has completely failed to take action to tackle the burning injustices?
That catchphrase, it actually bugs me a little. I like the term, I don't like how it's used. The burning injustice. It sounds like something I would expect from a comic book,
Prime Minister!
Can I first of all say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, I'm very sorry that he didn't take the opportunity when he stood up to welcome the anniversary of the union between Scotland and England. I think... I have to say... I have to say, I think it's the first time he hasn't welcomed or congratulated a union in this House. He asked the question about social mobility. And can I say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, can I remind him of what Dame Martina said in the Social Mobility Commission, said yesterday in relation to this report? My sense is there is a real commitment in government to try to make a difference in this area. I want everyone to have the opportunity to reach their potential, whatever their background. And that's why we're improving education, we're ensuring we're helping to create higher paid jobs, we're boosting home ownership. But what would the Right Honourable Gentleman's Party offer young people? Failed policies, broken promises, and piles of debt, just a millstone around their neck.
I do want to do a solid. I'm going to link the report to you in the chat because I have read it. I'm going to link you the Cliff's Notes because it's easier. It is. She's quite right. That is what Martina said. So, oh no, not in stupid Windows. There we go. There's kids are not treated like they're on pedestal. When I was in school, there was no purpose. Same here. When I was in school, and this is the most arrogant thing I'll ever say, but I had to wait for people to catch up because the school didn't have the option to help me just do better. And for those who were, and that included waiting for those who had learning difficulties, which is a test of one's patience, because I understand why they struggled. Now I do, especially. Thankfully I developed patience now, and I had some then. But it was quite sad that people were struggling because there wasn't something there to help them as much as it needed to be there. So I think things have changed, and I think I'm half the damn volume, am I? Am I? Okay, I'll turn the video down. My apologies, Great Smith and I didn't realise that it was so loud. Is that better?
The reality is social mobility is going backwards and things are getting worse under this government. I'll give you an example. Life expectancy in Britain is falling for the first time since 1945.
It has fallen by 6 months. 6 months. Seriously. Okay. Life expectancy in the UK is still pretty good overall. It doesn't take into account. It doesn't take into account like regions, because there are some where you'd live longer and some where you'd live less. But we still live nearly 81 years. That's not bad. We're above the US by what, 2 years? Well, nearly 2.5, I think, actually. And I know we're only next one beneath us is Japan, for God's sake. With new stresses and changes to systems and constant sociological evolution, which is basically the rate of fucking disease spreading, it's unsurprising new stresses would find their ways into existence. Life has changed so much. Look at those who are getting PTSD from Twitter. It is why I have taken to Twitter as a means of trolling, or just to post something I think is more relevant. So, for example, I tweeted the other day, I like pancakes. Underneath, not everything has to be political. To which someone replied how that was something somehow political, which made me chuckle. I think I earlier tweeted about how I think the Belgian bun is the best thing that the UK has ever created. I had to insert sarcasm at the bottom. Vipersol thankfully made a sarcasm sign just for it, because there were 1 or 2 people who didn't get the fucking joke. Just going to say now, Belgian buns are amazing. They make a lot of people with PTSD look bad, and it's annoying that there are. The troublesome thing is that one cannot deny that something has happened to them. But then, of course, there are types of PTSD, and them being equated to the more severe or put in the same box is quite troublesome for a lot of people. I don't want to denigrate what they experience. It's just a case that, I don't know, it's just frustrating, I guess. Still, we live 81 years. Losing 6 months off that, not so bad. I mean, come on, we retire at 65. You get maybe 15 years of living with constant visits to a doctor and the occasional visit from a relative while your mind slowly turns to jelly. Or pate, whichever you prefer, really. Class privilege, was that it? Yeah. Let's close that. Moving on.
Where does the Prime Minister think this government has gone wrong when we've reached the point where people now expect to live shorter lives than they did in the past?
I would argue, considering surely you'd want to save a bit of money, reducing people's lives by 6 months saves you money on pension payouts. Maybe you'd be okay with that. Unless you intend for them to work until they die. In, I don't know, a workhouse, perhaps. Yeah, I get why you're annoyed. Perfectly faded delusions. It's a tricky one. Hello, Saki. Reason for failing life expectancy, triggered snowflakes. I would argue the stresses of online life for a lot of younger people would certainly add to the reduction in life expectancy. Perhaps we should make it a point to inform and educate some people on how to best handle being online, in the sense of best dealing with criticism and being able to take criticism. Of course, there are lines, and many will cross it, because shiggles. I don't know. But it's still a case of a lot of people need to develop a thicker skin.
Prime Minister!
I say to the right honourable gentleman that, first of all, that it is not the case that people are now expecting to live shorter lives than they have done in the future. It is the case. No. What we have been doing is ensuring that we were providing for people at every stage of their lives, and for young people particularly today, ensuring that they have the opportunities to lead those full and healthy lives into the future. That's why all the actions we're taking across the board in ensuring there are jobs for people, ensuring those jobs are better paid, ensuring people have an encouragement to get into the workplace, and ensuring we provide for them through not just the welfare system but also our long-term plan for the National Health Service. At every stage of life, we are ensuring that we as Conservatives are improving people's lives, and in so many of those areas the right honourable gentleman has done nothing but vote against the policies this Conservative government has produced.
I do know that a number of the policies he voted against not because of party politics, but because of amendments and other little bits. There is something I hadn't thought to add. What reduces life expectancy yet is on the rise in the United Kingdom? I'll give you all a chance to work it out. And I'm not referring to violent knife crime. No, I'm referring to something else that you carry around for a little bit longer until you do something about it. If you ever do something about it. Not all of us can afford the cheats. Then again, if you do take the cheat option, you don't actually fix the problem. You merely remove a part of it, but still carry around the scars, and Michael Morris got it. Obesity. That is a growing problem in the United Kingdom. Wait, what? Have I missed something? That is actually another problem as well, they're perfectly faded delusions. And that's one of those damning statements for parity of esteem, in the sense that we, as the United Kingdom, have finally given mental health what it, needs, and that is equal treatment within the healthcare system, but we don't have enough people yet, suitable, ready, trained and qualified enough to be able to do the damn job. Oh, for God's sake, Serene. Oh dear, oh dear. And I wasn't talking about student debt. Of course, that is also a problem. It was obesity. There are others, I'm sure, that qualify, but obesity is on the rise in the UK. It has been for years. With obesity in the UK as well, though, we try and tackle it with kids, but when they become adults, we call it empowering.
Speaker, life expectancy has fallen by 6 months. Infant mortality is rising.
You know, those last extra 6 months are going to make, sitting on your replaced hips so much more pleasurable, right?
And up. This month, we've also learnt that a record 1.6 million food parcels were given out last year alone. Under this government, things are getting worse. Does the Prime Minister agree with her Secretary of State that it's the policies of this government that has meant that in one of the richest countries on this earth, food banks are now handing out 14 million meals a year to people, some of whom are in work, who simply haven't got enough to eat?
Yes, but okay. I think it's worth pointing out, I've not seen any studies on this yet, and I'd love to see that. That reasoning, not just for why the person went there, but all the factors, in fact, that went into that. In the sense that I'd like to know if, because of the rise in it, whether it be because of the claimed in-work poverty, and where that comes from, in the sense of, well, for example, pushing up the cost of living, like earlier mentioned in the stream, with those where middle class, whatever, people are buying homes somewhere else and pushing up the cost of living in other towns, which would then create poverty. So I do think it's worth exploring, and I'd certainly like to see that. I don't, of course. My family have used food banks. We really have. I get it. It's not great. I think it was recorded at 1.6 million food bank parcels being given in the past year, which then called for the Trussell Trust to say that the 5-week wait for universal credit had to end. But if memory serves, that was being reduced anyway in emergency cases. It is, of course, a huge increase. It's about, I think it was over 70% increase in parcels being handed out. But I'd like to know the circumstances for many of the cases, because I have a strange feeling a sizable amount of that can be attributed to the cost of living being raised in certain areas. And those themselves would have factors that would, they would intrigue me. I don't know, maybe I'm just sad enough to find that interesting. Never mind. Let us go back. I will link something in the chat for you, though. There you go. Little source.
Minister!
The best route out of poverty for people.
At any stage,
Order.
the question has been put, and the answer from the Prime Minister must be heard. The Prime Minister.
The best route
Yes, I'm very much aware of the benefit sanctions. It is precious.
out of poverty for people is to be in the workplace. We want to ensure that we are seeing more better paid jobs being created for people in this country, and that's what we're seeing under this government. We see record numbers of people in employment. We see wages rising for the real wages rising for the first time in a decade, and we see that this government is taking decisions that are helping people to keep more money in their pockets. Tax cuts for 32 million people, an increase in the national living wage, freezing fuel duty. All of these have been of major benefit to people. And what did the right honourable gentleman do? On fuel duty freezes, on tax cuts, he's voted against them over a dozen times.
Well, that's because he supports raising taxes, because that's the only way he can think. As far as I was aware with job centres, Davey, some of the rules have changed. One of the guys I used to be on the work programme with that works for them. You owe no apology for being moany. In fact, I'm all for it. The more you complain, the more we have to talk about. So please, just have at it. But this friend of mine who works there indicates they're not the same. Because they have to be proactive, they have to help you, which is something they never did when I was unemployed. In fact, I remember this because I was the only one looking for work. It was on me. They helped with nothing. And hello, Reason Vision.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, many of those people receiving food parcels, which has increased by 600,000 in 4 years, are actually people in work.
Yes, cost of living. Remember that thing? I'd like to see if there's any kind of link to that. The annoying thing is when trying to fact-check that kind of stuff, there is no fact-checking on it. It's really irritating. Because now I don't understand all I have to go on is, okay, so a 70% increase in food parcels being given out. Hello, Nico. Hope you're well. I have nothing to go on, and that's really annoying. Because I would like to understand it more than just be given a number. I would like now that for that to be broken down. Is that too much to ask?
Because of the low wages they're on, and indeed the frozen wages for many over the past 10 years.
That doesn't mean... Hang on, think about it, give me a second. Right, that doesn't mean, because wages are frozen, that they can't afford to live. It means that the cost of living has either forced them into poverty in the area and they've taken the decision to stay there when they could just leave. I mean, if you want to... I'm going to sound so heartless. If you want to reduce the cost of living for yourself, you move. And then you invest in things like, I don't know, walking boots or a push bike. And then you take the easier way to work. Maybe I'm just being sensible. I will agree, though. It is a form of in-work poverty when wages have stagnated. And the cost of living has gone up, which makes no sense. There are some things that I do think contribute to this that could be tackled in a way. In the sense that you could look at the ridiculous prices set as rent by private landlords. Yes, I would say that pressure on the employment market could be reduced from the unfettered immigration. I think that would help. There are some employment sectors where it's okay, though. I tend to think we rely quite a lot on immigrant people involved in the medical industry. I'm okay with that. I think it's tricky because in-work poverty is a bit of a strange one. The circumstances around it, I don't know, there's just not... And I did bother to go through a few sources. Yes, I'm well aware of the DSS stuff. It's quite irritating. My sister recently moved, and she moved into a house with a 5-year lease. But they had to prove that where the money was coming from was guaranteed. Because my sister is kind of on benefit as well. Which is strange. It's complicated.
Even our own Secretary of State admitted that universal credit has caused people to rely on food banks. Yeah. The number of older people now not getting the care they desperately need has risen to 1.4 million. Think of that, 1.4 million people in need of social care. Things are getting worse. Does the Prime Minister agree with Labour's plan to properly fund social care, or with her former deputy who wants to tax the over 50s and take away their benefits?
Prime Minister!
As I have said on a number of occasions in this House, we agree that we do need to ensure there is a sustainable long-term future for social care, and we'll be bringing forward proposals in relation to that. We have given councils access to nearly £4 billion more for adult social care this year. That means a 9% increase in real terms in funding for adult social care between 2015-16 and 2019-20.
I do want to talk about the rent thing again because of it being mentioned in the chat. For a bit of context, a council house where I live is about $350 a month in rent. It's not that much, really. But the rent of a private house of similar size is twice that, at least. The closer you are to the ocean, of course, the price goes up exponentially. To me, that is... I mean, I get the ocean one, I get the point. Oh, it's a view, it's worth money, yes, I'll pay it. I won't, I can't, I don't give a shit about the ocean. But the private sector is not regulated. And I think that's an issue. How do you regulate it, though? That's the issue as well. I think the rent needs to match the cost of living in the area. And I don't think it's reasonable to charge £800 pounds plus for a house that someone could get from the council for half the price. And the only reason they can't get it is because they're stuck in a private house and are therefore low priority, but are living hand to mouth because their cost of living has been exploded by some selfish cunt who probably only did the mortgage, remortgage the house just so they could double the rent and have them pay the mortgage off.
It's not just about the funding that goes into social care. It's also about ensuring... Oh no, lots of Labour members say, oh yes it is. Actually no, it's about ensuring that best practice is seen across local authorities and NHS trusts.
The Prime Minister here is quite right. It's not just about throwing money at it. It's making sure that those that have the money and use the money know what they're doing with the money. This is a glaring problem Labour had when they were in power. Okay? When they had the chances to do it right, they instead decided to, hello Teddy, they decided to just throw money at it until it worked. But the problem was, they never stopped throwing money at it. They didn't understand the processes. In fact, that was one of the major talking points of Tony Blair as Prime Minister. He never understood anything he was doing. He never understood any of the processes, procedures. He didn't understand the departments. People said this. There are memoirs written, and it is stated quite clearly. He had no idea what he was doing. But because he had that personality in those cringe adverts, people loved him. People would line up to suck him off. Fucking warmonger. I think it's just one of those, hello Angel. I think it's just one of those tragic things that Labour need to learn, because Labour will more than likely win the next election. But they need to know you cannot just throw money at something. You have to be sensible. You've got to think about it. You don't just say, oh, I trust you, you'll do this right, you'll be fine. Get on with it. Yeah, more diversity.
And that's why this isn't just about funding for social care for local authorities. It's also about our long-term plan for the National Health Service, the biggest cash boost in the National Health Service's history, stability for the NHS, improving social care, providing for people in their old age.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister seems to have a head in the sand. The reality is that $7 billion has been cut from adult social care since 2010, a system teetering on the brink of collapse as care companies go into administration, and the stress on the residents of those homes and their families is unbelievable.
From personal experience, I'm going to say what happens next. When a local care company goes into administration, I say this because it happened to two companies in my town. My town is mostly care homes anyway. Hello, Duck Dog. The local government steps in and relocates all those within those homes so that they are then sent to a suitable place where they can be offered the same care or better, and not too far from where they were before. There you go.
We need a serious strategy that ensures people get the social care they need when they need it.
I think the only reason he gets really uppity on this is because of how close he is to being put in a care home. and he's concerned somebody's going to change his bottom and leave him with a nappy rash.
Under this government, Mr. Speaker, things are getting worse on our streets too. Violent crime is up by 19%.
This is interesting. I do apologise, I had a mint. This is quite an interesting point. Because he indicated that violent crime is actually on the rise. He's given a huge hello shot in hand. But that's not true. In fact, that is outright, demonstrably a lie. Many, many sources, and I will link them all after the stream, indicate that overall violent crime is far lower than what it was in the 90s. The only figures that show that violent crime is at the highest record level is from the police figures. But those same police figures are unreliable. So actually, hello Gulf City Synthesizer, and we all should, of course, protect Corbyn's poor bum. Yes. Maybe, like, with whatever it is for doubt and respect, there should be one for protect as well, if there isn't already. So whatever it is you press for doubt, yeah, and something different for respect, now have a new one for protect. P, let's go with that. Press P to protect Corbyn's poor bum. Point is, he's quoting the wrong sources. And I will link the... Where is it? Hang on. I will link it after the stream. Screw it, I can't be bothered. Let's go back to this.
Robberies up by 18%, knife crime at the highest level on record, and 2.3 million criminal investigations closed because the police were unable to identify a suspect, I believe because they have insufficient staff to do it.
I should point out, and yes, he did say that, but in certain context, I'll go back actually because it's important that we get context. Yes, the police statistics do in fact include hate speech. So Prospero, you are quite right. I will link this as well after the stream.
Crime is up by 19%. Robberies up by 18%. Knife crime at the highest level on record.
Knife crime at the highest level on record. The police figures and the hospital ones show knife crime is at a near or highest record level. But there is no source. There is not a single source that can confirm that it is at a record level. There is not one. So where he has derived this from is from the police sources, and their information is unreliable. Should stop dancing with eco nuts. Oh, they were doing that well, weren't they?
And 2.3 million criminal investigations closed because the police were unable to identify a suspect, I believe because they have insufficient staff to do it.
My apologies.
Does the Prime Minister accept that there is a violent crime epidemic that has arisen on her watch and is tearing our communities and our families apart? It has to be addressed by investment in our communities.
I like this idea that the way we stop violent crime from happening is by throwing money at the very communities that violent crime is prevalent. I get we want to address it earlier so that it doesn't become an issue when they get older. But I've already said, and I've already come up with solutions for potentially addressing this that are actually free. In fact, one should consider investing in the cheaper options as long as they are viable, like a Discord server, encouraging more people to be social online as well as in real life. Need the scene with Tommy Wiseau? Yeah, I know. We do. The point is, I don't support the idea of just throwing money at communities. I do agree we do need to have some money invested in them. But again, much like with other services, NHS as well and all that, I want to know everything about where that money's going. I want to know it's being spent well and wisely. Yes, more swings and playgrounds. We have actually got some Teddy opposite where I live. And you know what? You know who uses it? The teenagers to smoke joints, drink cider, really cheap cider, and what are they? Oh yes, to finger blast some of the girls on the tire swing, and use their moped to make the merry-go-round go really, really fast. Kids love it. That's why there are no kids here using it. You know why? Because their parents had them indoors playing video games. It does. It fears. You're quite right, Prospero. Prospero, you should do your own streams on that kind of stuff. I'd listen.
Prime Minister!
Can I first of all say to the right honourable gentleman, because he made a reference in relation to care companies at the beginning of his question, with a suggestion that this was a worrying time for all those who are in the provisions that are provided by those care companies. Of course it's a concerning time for them and their families, and for the employees of the company concerned. I think he's referring to Four Seasons. The Care Quality Commission is absolutely clear that there is no risk of service disruption at this time. And there should never be a gap in care for an individual. And that's because of the 2014 Care Act, introduced under Conservatives in government, which places a duty on local authorities to intervene to protect individuals where their provider is unable to carry on care.
I mentioned something about this earlier. Yeah. Hello, Adam Kim. Hope you're well.
Because of business failure. He then went on to talk about the issue of crime. And can I say to the right honourable gentleman, first of all, what we do see is that overall, under the crime survey, actually crime is down by a third.
I would also... I'd be remiss if I didn't point it out, because it is being pointed out, it has been mentioned a lot. The number of stabbings in London has skyrocketed over the last year. It really has. That is certainly what many would argue to be an epidemic. However, the statistics that he was citing from, and incorrectly, were for the United Kingdom, and therefore not accurate. Adam, you got a bottle of vodka. I'm jealous. There is a bottle of Viking's Blood mead I desperately want to get. I'm going to get it at some point. I'm just waiting for the retard who gives me work to pay me.
He quotes the figures from police recorded crime. He has actually been hauled up, I think, by the National Statistics Authority previously for failing to quote the crime survey and for only quoting the police recorded crime.
Gulf City synthesizer. What happens if you remove London from overall UK? The overall crime does go down a bit, but it's reasonably distributed around other cities as well.
He talks about more money being available to police. There's around £1 billion more money available to the police this
No, it's not.
year. Police and crime commissioners plan to recruit 3,000 more police officers. But what do we also need to do to tackle knife crime and to tackle serious violence? And yes, we are concerned about it. That's why we've brought forward the serious violence strategy. We also need to ensure that we're dealing with drug crime. We also need to ensure that we're turning young people away from violence and ensuring that police and others have the powers to do their jobs. So I'm sorry, I have to say to the right honourable gentleman, I'll take no lectures on this from somebody who voted against more money for the police and voted against tougher laws on knife crime, because that's not helping the police or us.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Well, Mr. Speaker, maybe if she doesn't...
Yeah, the 3,000 officer thing isn't great. It's not as impressive as you think it is anyway.
Believe me, she can believe...
Well, I would say just having more police doesn't fix the problem. There is a correlation to their presence, yes, but they are not enough of a deterrent. Just simply bragging about it isn't really... It doesn't mean shit.
Leave her own Home Secretary. He said in March, serious violence is on the rise, communities are being torn apart, and families are losing their children.
Yes, but in context, he wasn't talking about, oh, do you think more police would help here? No, he wasn't. That wasn't the line of questioning. You just cherry-picked what he said to make your own little point about something else.
21,000 less police officers is a pretty obvious connection. There's likely to be a rise in crime and disorder as a result of it.
Do you remember at the start when I said I was perhaps considering renaming these streams the post hoc ergo propter hoc streams? Yeah. And while we have a pause, I'm going to get a drink. Well, I'm just going to grab this bottle of water because I'm adventurous. And I totally give a shit about the environment.
Mr. Speaker, under this government, things in this country are getting worse. Their cuts and incompetence have left communities struggling and pushed public services into crisis. They've cut council budgets by 50%. Poverty is up, waiting times are up, violent crime is up, all under a government that seems to care more about pushing its very damaging austerity agenda than tackling the burning social injustices. Ahead of tomorrow's elections in England, can the Prime Minister explain why from social care to crime, from life expectancy to poverty, things are getting worse under her government?
This is such a nebulous question. I'm not even kidding.
Prime Minister!
The biggest cash boost to the NHS in its history under this Conservative government. More people in work than ever before. More children in good and outstanding schools getting the opportunities for their futures. And what do we see from Conservative councils up and down the country? Conservative councils give better services, they recycle more, they fix more potholes, and they charge lower taxes. A vote for Labour is a vote for mismanagement, worse services and higher taxes. It's Conservative councils that give better services and charge you less.
Right, we should address that. I think council tax is quite irritating because both Labour and the Conservatives, hello Quilt, they both make a number of claims about council tax. And one of the major glaring weaknesses within the Conservatives' claims about less council tax is that they use data, the party, when they talk about it, they use data that's derived from Band D, which is an average, which they're deriving it from an average on the wrong one. You shouldn't derive your facts from incorrect information. So, for those who aren't British, in each constituency, council tax that we pay for a privilege of living in that area is derived by bands. Those bands are set as like in more densely populated city areas, you pay higher council tax to those who live in more rural areas. Puckbaker, mine also went up by about £300. Is it 300? Was it 150? Doesn't really matter, it went up. It's a pain in the ass. And Band D is not one of the highest. Let's go with that. Since the Tories were indicating that theirs pay less, I think that's a giveaway enough of what Band D is as opposed to Band A. This basically means that the Tory party are using one of the lowest denominators for an average. And this is what made worse by the fact that in England, 2/3 of the homes in this country are in bands A to C. Oh, hang on, I'm incorrect. There is something I'm wrong about. Band D is the other end. It's actually higher. But because there are less of them, it's not, yeah. Because Band D is higher and there are less of them, yeah, that average kind of just disappears. To skip over to Labour, well, their mistake is that they didn't actually separate the councils that they occupy in. They use data on the average tax per dwelling, not the rates. Which means that the data, the shown data, is of the actual amount paid, has the advantage of showing the actual amount. The problem that with the data is that in some cases it shows money being collected by councils when in fact most of that tax level is set by Conservative councils. It means that the Labour Council and Conservative Council comparisons is flawed because you can't split the two out using any of the data that you have, which makes this all quite messy. There is a way of fixing it, but it doesn't matter. Let us continue, because I think we're getting close to the paper fiddler. Now we're going to skip ahead, because I want the paper fiddler.
I'm sure they will have heard the passionate plea from my honourable friend for his constituency.
Right.
Ian Blackford.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Protect your paper. Press P to protect your paper. We must protect your paper.
Speaker, Scotland's First Minister has pledged to match free EU student fees through to 2021. Will the Prime Minister follow this example, or is she determined to build a bigger hostile environment?
Right, so one of the major false premises with this is that we are leaving the EU anyway. This concept of us, or Scotland, providing free education to EU students. Who the fuck foots that bill? Seriously. There is no point matching it if we're leaving. I'm all for, by the way, students in the EU coming here to learn, because I'm sure many would argue some of our colleges are better than some of the EU's colleges in some of the member states of the EU. I'm sure there are some that would also be better than some of ours. It is a very much debated subject. Scotland, though, doesn't feature. And I don't know if this has changed much, but when I started university, a degree was 3 years long. From your first year, second year, third year, that was it. That's not the case in Scotland. It's 4 years in Scotland. I don't know why. I don't know if the system has changed academically to be a 4-year degree instead of 3. With cost of tuition fees, I think that is quite expensive, since it's £9,000 a year, so 4 years would be quite stupid. And Prospero, I would never... Yeah, I don't think that's right. I think if there are scholarships, perhaps arguments can be made for those who qualify. But I think that's a case of qualifying with preferential treatment being given to UK nationals first. But I know that a lot of the 4 years in the US as well. That's interesting. I didn't know that, because it was 3 years when I started mine. That's interesting. Perhaps it has changed since I started. I didn't have a chance to look this up, because for me, 3 made sense. Because then you had 1 year to goof off and 2 years to actually do some work. Granted, I was there for 6 years, but I went on to do post-grad stuff, so it didn't matter.
Minister!
We've made clear about the position for EU students in this year, and we'll make the announcements in good time for students for future years. But I think I'm right in saying that what the Scottish Government has actually done is said that EU students can have free tuition up to 2024, but English students will have to pay.
Well, we've got to get our money off someone somewhere, don't we? And since they're not going to get it off Scottish students, it's unsurprising. Because they've given it... Didn't they give it to Scottish students for free as well? Yeah, somebody had to foot that bill.
Ian Blackford!
Quite remarkable, Mr. Speaker, because it's the Tories that have introduced fees for English students. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to leaving the EU, the Prime Minister's vision is blinded by ideology. In a no deal, her government intends to curb EU student visas to 3 years. Mr. Speaker, Scottish university courses are generally for 4 years.
I think I know why. Firstly, the ideology comment. Lol, SNP of all people saying that. I know why it's 4 years. It's not because of the quality of education, although one could certainly argue whether the quality of education in a Scottish university is going to match that of an English one. Seriously. If I go and quickly pull up the list of best unis in the UK, Let's see if any of them from Scotland's in the top 10. Best in UK list. Okay. Top for 2020. Ooh. We might have one. We have one. Okay, you've got one. You have one in the top 10. And you have one in the top 15. Just one. Seriously. You have one in the top 15. That is amazing. Although I do notice my university has dropped 7 places. That's not good. Although I would assume... Oh, it's gone down because of entry standards. Right. Well, fuck you, UEA. But yes, St Andrews, 3rd. Oxford and Cambridge, both top 2, which makes fuck all sense. Your science programs are inferior. I would assume the reason your degrees are 4 years long is because no one can understand a fucking word your lecturers say. Yes, I'm being an elitist prick for a minute because it amuses me. But I will link the guy at the table for you, so you can yourselves have a look at it. Let us get to this.
The Scottish Government and Scottish universities have asked repeatedly for this simple change to be made to reflect our circumstances.
I can, under these circumstances, agree that those who are EU students should have that kind of ability to be able to get the 4 years they need through that permit. But as far as I'm aware, there are already systems in place that would make it so that all they have to do is fill in some paperwork, like anyone else, to get an extension.
Well, the Prime Minister confirmed today that her government will extend visas to 4 years to allow for Scottish university students, or will she once again completely ignore the wishes and the interest of Scotland, as she has done right through this whole shambolic Brexit process?
Prime Minister!
Says the right honourable gentleman, I understand that the situation is not quite as problematic for those students as he sets out, given the ability to convert visas, but he started off his question by saying that the government should not be driven by ideology. This is from the SNP. The SNP. If the SNP are worried about students in Scottish universities, they need to ensure that they're spending more time improving the quality of education in Scotland and less time obsessing about independence.
Well, their degrees are probably 3 years long at that point, wouldn't they? Instead of this 4-year bollocks. Unless you're about to tell me all their students do a foundation year first. Which, by the way, to those who do foundation years, I did one. They're brilliant. But I don't think everyone starts as that as an entry level to get into university now, do they? Anyway, I think we are done here. This has been absolutely cancerous, and honestly, I can't be arsed. I'm going to go and record tomorrow's video and, I don't know, play a guitar. Thank you all very much for listening. I do apologise for the audio issues, and if you heard any occasional, or even at one point may have heard me do this. Yeah, I did that once. Thank you all for listening, and have yourselves a lovely evening.